Hello, Paul. Good morning for
Hi,
you, I
Phil.
think,
Good
in
morning.
Canada.
Good
It's
evening.
not,
Good afternoon.
it's the, well, that's a very confusing question in Spain, but it's the afternoon. It's 5 p.m. here in Gran Canaria. And happy to be here. I'm ready for a bit of a book party. Are you?
Absolutely. Love books.
Just hi to everyone out there who is watching. I would love for you to just tell me who you are and where you're watching from. Just say hi in the chat and anything else you want would be great to hear from you. Uh, and yeah, some of you might be tuning in because you know Paul. Paul is a good friend of mine. He is the co host of a podcast that we both run called The Trouble with Writing. He is a fellow writing coach and also a fellow writer, fiction writer. Tell us a little bit about that, Paul. What do you write? And
Yeah, I write fiction, as you said. To be honest with you, it's funny because although in a previous incarnation, I was a professional private investigator. So everyone thinks I write hard boiled fiction. I actually don't. I write romance, literary fiction, but with a romantic relationship kind of lean to it. But I had my first short story published in 2010 in the UK in an anthology, and that was the kind of validation I needed to say, let's keep doing this. And since then, I've been working on two novel projects, both unfinished. So anytime I encounter another writer who's completed a work, I really appreciate it and admire it because I know the challenge. So I'm really excited to be here to celebrate yours.
I also thought, you got the hard boiled theme going with your grammatical videos and YouTube channel. So maybe you wrote that. But yeah, it would be great to one day see your name in print and get my hands on one
Working
of
on
the
it? Yep.
books.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, what are we going to do today? We shouldn't be here for too long, but I hope
Right.
by now you know that we're here to launch my latest book. It is a novella called Before, During, After. And I'm going to answer a few questions about the book. Stick around if you're interested in publishing, because I'll talk a little bit about the process of how this book came to be. I know that's always interesting for writers.
Yeah.
And I'll give you some readings from the book. This is
Great.
my very first reading of this book. I have an event next week here in Las Palmas, but yeah, the book is now out. Came out on Monday, so the reviews are starting to come in. It's great to see people reading it.
Yeah. Well, and for those of you out there who don't know Phil, let me introduce Phil. Phil is an author and writing coach originally from the UK who now resides in Las Palmas, Spain. Moved into a new home. Congratulations on that. And his previous works include two collections of short fiction and 15 brief moments in time, a novella-in-flash, which I've also read and it's fantastic. And we are here, as Phil says, today to celebrate the launch of this, Before, During, and After. I've got my copy.
I also have my
Yeah,
copy here. It's
yeah,
not
and it's
showing up on camera.
fantastic. Yeah, well, this is an amazing, amazing piece of work, Phil. I've told you that before, and I don't mean to exaggerate, but it really is. And I got to say, the first thing that I noticed, the most striking feature of this, and perhaps its most unique feature, is its structure. It's got this kind of chain link or almost like relay race structure. So I wonder if you could describe the book and tell us a little bit about this structure. It's fascinating to me, and I'm sure the audience would like to hear about it.
Yeah, for sure. First, I guess I should introduce what a novella in Flash is. I hope we've got some other Flash fiction writers or novella in Flash people coming along because I know lots of people in that world too. Really, it's a name that has been put to a kind of book that has always been around. You know, these books have been published for 100, if not hundreds of years. But since the branding of very short pieces of fiction as flash fiction, which kind of started in the 80s, 90s. We now have a form where there is a longer book of interconnected mini stories. That's what this is. So, yeah, as for the structure, I mean, it actually all started because I thought I wanted to. I was trying to be a bit clever, and I wanted to write 60 stories about in which the story time, so the time of the events in that mini chapter, were 60 seconds, and which took 60 seconds to read, which I guess would be, 200 words or so. So is this idea of 60 moments, 60 minutes, and that evolved into figuring out how they would be connected. And yeah, it centered around these moments, an important moment in characters' lives. So I settled upon 20 different characters in the book who experience 20 incredible events which transform their lives. And the book is split into 60 mini chapters of these moments, and we have before, during, and after the moment. So I actually like to think of it. I like how you said it's a chain, Paul. It's a bit like, whereas you might see a normal novel or a movie as an arc, a story arc, this is like three rings which are interconnected. One ring would be the before, these events where each story is connected to the last. And, we're going around in a circle, but at some point we move on to the next ring. So I kind of think of it like those magicians who have those three metal rings
Yeah.
that are about this big. They sort of take them apart and put them back together. Yeah, and I find this kind of book, the possibilities of how you can fit stories together and structure them is endless. It's really fascinates me, like the shape of stories and how they can be, things like rings or pyramids or 3D shapes, rather than the typical sort of up and down tension or the arc which we find in a story. So yeah, I guess my last book, the one you mentioned, of 15 Brief Moments in Time, is more like a kind of a wheel, right, with a central character
Yeah.
and lots of spokes coming off it. So
Yeah.
I just find it really good to like visualize these kinds of books, and I hope that gives everyone listening a bit of an idea about what this book is and how it works.
Well, it also, those kind of shapes and structures provide a different feeling, right? A typical arc provides either a sense of triumph, happy ending, or a sense of tragedy where everything falls apart. Your book has a very different feeling by the end of it. You come away with neither triumph or tragedy, but a sense of empathy. You have this feeling like everyone is connected, even when they think their little action and their little experience is isolated. It's not. And the book, the structure connects everybody, but also the feeling connects everybody. It has a very unusual impact by the time you're finished it. It's really interesting. And I can't compare it to anything. I've never experienced that kind of thing. I think we've all experienced non-linear stories or portmanteau, where stories move back and forth in time, and that can kind of disrupt that typical arc. But you also have a sort of diagonal feeling in some direction with those kind of stories, because although the plot may be disintegrated, the mood isn't necessarily disintegrated. But this one's really interesting because you get to experience so many different people and they're sharing something, and you get to decide what it is that's connecting them. What is the connective thread above and beyond the structure of these? It's
Yeah, I
really
suppose
fascinating.
if you think of it as sort of timelines, you have the pink timeline of before, which connects the characters directly. So we discover, one character carries on from the next in
Yeah.
physical space usually, and then the other threads, the time difference between the before and the during might not be the same for each character,
Yeah.
but they're still connected like vertically and horizontally. So it was a quite there were points where I wrote it and I had to walk back all the steps and think, hang on, have I gone off timeline, or has
Yeah.
something wrong happened? I mean, the way I did it was, I think I wrote the before section as all individually, all the 20 characters. I wrote that before section, and then the next ones that I wrote the during and after for each character. And then after all
Mm.
that, I had to go through and make sure that it made sense and connected up in the time of everything.
Well, another thing that I find interesting about it is that whereas a typical linear story really builds on cause and effect, this happens, which leads to this, which leads to this structure really challenges that and makes you think about what are the causes of these changes, these events. I don't want to give away spoilers, but what are the causes here? And the only really true common thread here is the reader, because the reader has access to everyone's story. So by the end of it, I kind of felt like, what caused everything here? I did. I kind of felt implicated in the story. It's a very unusual effect. Really fascinating. Phil, how about reading something?
For sure. Yeah, I'm going to give a reading from each section. They're pretty short. You'll see that the chapters are, yeah, quite brief. And I guess just to introduce, we haven't really talked about what the book is about or where it's set. So
Ah, yes.
to give you a little bit of background on that, it's a story of 20 characters who are all connected by living in the same unnamed small town in America, and they all have a connection to a high school. Some of them work there, some of them are students there, and some of them are connected to other characters. And we start with the kind of central character, I guess, is Coach Primley. He's an aging basketball coach who's been a long-term servant to the school. And I'm going to read the before section from Coach Primley. I think I'll share the text on screen as well. Would that be a good idea?
Sure.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
All right, great. I hope you can see that. I'll make it a bit bigger. So before, Coach Primley. These kids are about to pass into a world outside the womb. Even if they stay cooped up in this town, they'll filter through community college on the way to a soulless job via Dairy Queen and Family Trauma Avenue. For the players on my varsity team, high school might be the highest high they ever taste. When I was their age, I didn't care about anything but game day and the Sunday meal after church. How can I change the course of their lives? With one little speech. They sit there and look at me from the gymnasium stands. I've smelled the same floor varnish my whole 30 years here. Perhaps I should just tell them the ultimate secret to gaining respect, being right and saying the same thing every year. There are other kids. There will be other kids, but after this, I'll be a ghost. No more than a faded photo with an empty trophy cabinet. When my speech gets going, those 30 years will be the ones talking, not me. I make out like it's off the cuff, but I rehearsed more times than I shot the ball through the hoop. What is a man with no job, no wife, no kids? That's actually the first line on the paper in my pocket. I stand behind the principal. I'm so close I can smell the bullshit as he thanks the staff members one by one. We get that every year instead of a pay rise. His voice drones on like some bad actor in a teen movie. If he was on my team, I'd run the lies out of him. There's an alchemy to being liked. You've got to give up caring, act aloof, but always be listening. You have to be one of them, even though when you were their age, the internet didn't exist. You have to remember you were the same and forget the teammates who were broke, crippled, or dead. You have to forgive yourself for ruining a college coaching career because you gave up two of your players for doping. That's in the speech too. My mouth goes dry, just like it did at Marta's funeral. The school board forced me back after less than a month, even though I could barely see the next minute in front of me. I clear my throat and it echoes around the gym. 10 seconds to game time. When I think about it, life is kind of like a game clock with a couple of timeouts and just a few seconds to celebrate. Sometimes you foul out even when it ain't your fault. I breathe in the court one last time and catch the scent of game day against our rivals, the Timberwolves. Those days I wake up and drive through woodland roads for an hour to calm my mind. Then Principal Joyce says, give a hand to your Coach Primley, like I'll always belong to these kids. The whooping and shouting starts. Time to show them the gold extracted from 30 years of lessons. Make this one count, Primley. Then be a ghost.
It's great.
I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but who out there thinks that something bad might happen to Coach Primley?
It feels ominous, doesn't it?
It
Poor
feels
coach.
ominous. It's like the detective who gets shot the last day before they get to
retire.
retirement. Yeah, because
Yeah.
Coach Primley is just about to retire. Hi to everyone out there who is checking in, saying hi. Sitara, good to see you. Anik, where is the link to the store? I'll be dropping the link very soon. Very soon at the end of this broadcast. But if you want to Google it before, during, after by my name on the screen, Philip Charter, or you can find it on Amazon and lots of other links. Martina. Oh, an audiobook read by me. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Speak to my publisher. Sitara is joining us from Pakistan. Okay, great. Yeah. I guess I'll be reading something from the during section, from the after section in a little bit. Paul, did you have another question?
Well, I was going to ask you, yeah. As you said earlier, this whole story, this whole book is set in a small town, unnamed small town in America. Yet, quite clearly, you're not from America. So I'm curious about what inspired you to write a story that's set there rather than set in the UK, set in Spain. What was it about America that drew you to this material?
Yeah, good question. I've always been drawn to writing about America. I mean, I visited New York City pretty briefly, so I can't say that I've got a lot of first-hand experience of being in the United States. But obviously, as you know, you're from Canada, Paul, and the United States has a massive influence on our culture in terms of the stories that we consume. I think it is a great breeding ground for stories, and I'm especially interested in looking at the disparity in wealth and in circumstance that a lot of people find themselves in. And I think there is a greater difference in society in America than there is in some countries. And also, I guess I hope that there's a bigger audience for this as well. I think, talking about a small town in England, let's say, where the characters are connected, perhaps it doesn't seem like there's as much room for danger or for people around the world to understand and know the details of that. So I love writing stories about where I'm from as well. But yeah, there's something about, especially small town America, the long road, the the gas station and the diner in the middle of nowhere, and these kind of small towns really fascinates me.
In that kind of a size country, Canada as well, if you're in a small town, it can be extremely isolated in a way that is perhaps very different than anywhere in Europe, right? The distances are so grand that a small town isolated can really evolve into its own little place, and feel very much a part of, separate from greater America culture and society. It's also a place of extremes, right? Where extremes of wealth and extremes of poverty, so the stakes feel higher. Perhaps like the UK, in Canada, if you're in trouble, there's a lot of safety nets. There's a lot of protections. There's a lot of comforts available, even when you're struggling. So the stakes are a bit lower. We're sort of a middle class society. In the US, when things go wrong for you, they go extremely wrong, and there are very few safety nets. So those stakes feel higher, even for, a high school principal or coach. I wonder, when I read that first chapter about Coach Primley, if he were to retire tomorrow, what world would he be going into? What would his life be like, stripped of his identity as Coach Primley and his access to his players and his students in that environment? It could be really devastating for such a person. He may have nothing waiting for him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, big shout out to teachers in the US. I know some, and they work extremely hard under difficult conditions. And I think a lot of what they do get is the respect and admiration of the community and people in that town. And you're right, that's a shame when you lose that, because that's really what you're feeding off. Because it can be hard to make ends meet, and as you said, there's not a great safety net in the US. That makes for a more exciting setting for stories, I hope. Yeah, I'm just checking out the comments. I've added a link to the book. You can find it at pelicanesis.com. That is the publisher of the book, and there's links to get the book in all kinds of different outlets, all the traditional places you find books, and if you happen to be in California, in bookstores in California too.
I would also add, Phil, for some of the viewers, especially some of the viewers for whom English is not their native language and they may be still learning, this is not terribly challenging, right? It's not super long. Your prose is elegant and sophisticated, but very readable, right? I think it's very readable. And also a great example of all the things that we talk about on Trouble with Writing, for example, varying sentence lengths. I love the way you punctuate ideas and moments with short, punchy sentences. So for the language learners out there, don't be afraid of this. Get a copy.
Thanks for saying that, Paul. Very kind. Should we move on, and perhaps I can read something from the middle of the book, from the during section? It's another
Let's do
brief
that.
one. I just need to find it here on my online copy. This is from Amanda O'Rourke, who is a cop, police officer responding to a dangerous situation. And this is her life-changing moment. So let me just share this on screen, and we'll have another brief look into the world of Before, During, After. Amanda O'Rourke, during. Question: where are the perps and what are they packing? Answer: one at the back exit. Gun could be a replica. The other is strutting around like a peacock on speed. Gun is a gangland pea shooter. Question: how will they respond to direct orders or the escalation of aggression? A. Losing conviction and transferring power to the cops. B. Unaffected. C. By matching their own increase in aggression. Answer C. Question. Is the fat guy slumped next to the counter wounded or dying? Answer. That depends on how long this takes. He's pretty quiet. Question. Has your partner recognized the need to stall for backup so they can cover the back door? Answer. No. He has given an ultimatum to the gunman. He cares more about glory than protecting a partner who was once more than a partner. Question. Is any of the 20-something people, if any of the 20-something people get into the crossfire, will your gun take the blame? Answer. You won't even get a shot away before the guy pops you. He's got the sight advantage. Hope the Kevlar will do its job. Question. Why has nobody turned off that plinky blinky music? And whatever happened to rock and roll? Answer. Tell the one at the back counter to turn the music off. Shout loud from behind the entrance wall. The ski mask nods and turns it off. Good. Now you hear the tension. It sounds like the slow tear of an infinite piece of paper. You also notice the outline of nails under the slender gloved hands. A female perp. Women never dream this stuff up. They only go along with abusive partners. Question. Why would this dude point his gun at a female cop? According to what every other no good thinks, women are more likely to go easy on you. Question. Are you having a good time? Answer. It's impossible to tell. Time has stopped and your body is weightless. Question. Will she get away? Answer. His accomplice already left out the other door. Backup didn't arrive, so she's gone. Question. Did the bullet hit you before or after you got a shot away? Answer. You were almost falling before you hear it. Your hand is on your neck, and you drop to your knees and roll in the sugar crumbs on the checkered floor. The linoleum swallows you. Warm red filling oozes through your fingers. Your windpipe burns. Question. How many of the shots Davis fired have hit him? Answer. You can't see, but you hope all of them. Question. Why have you never been here before? Cops get a 25% discount on boxes. Answer. 2 more shots. You shift right and catch the sight of the perp's stiffening legs. You're both down on the floor of the donut diner, rolling in the dirt with an unlucky fat guy. You try to meet his eyes through the ski mask, but he stares up at the ceiling fan, which spins forever.
Thank you, Phil. That's a great tense moment.
As I said, I'm a little bit obsessed with diners, and this is the Little O Diner, which is a kind of donut and coffee joint in the town where the book is set. And as you can tell, some big action goes down in the Little O Diner.
One thing I noticed here, especially with Amanda's parts, it really jumps out, but it's true for all of them. At the beginning of the book, you have a long list of all the characters, and they span age groups, professions, even ethnicities. They're all kinds of different people in a community. How did you managed to do it? You managed to give every character their own unique perspective. Even when the book is written, in a sense, in your voice, they all have their own voice. They all have their own perspective. For example, Amanda O'Rourke, she's a cop with training, so she's going through this sort of checklist of questions to ask in a dire moment. She's resorting to her training, which is a very authentic and realistic characterization of that experience. How did you sort of approach developing every character's unique way of thinking, way of speaking? Like, how did you juggle all that and maintain it through those 3 sections before, during, and after? That's a really fascinating detail for me, a really fascinating element.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. It was an interesting process, I guess. With longer works or short stories, I would normally develop a character a bit and try and get to know them. But obviously, with 20 characters, I didn't do a huge amount of like research and backstory. Yeah, and Paul's showing there the list of characters that you can sort of refer back to and get an idea of who's who. I guess the answer is I always like characters to be diverse and different. That's something that's important to me in my work and my life as well. Like I've traveled and met lots of brilliant people from all over the world. So I guess some of the way that they think and speak is based on experience. Some is based on spending a bit of time with each character's complete story and trying to differentiate it a bit. But yeah, like you brought up with Amanda's internal reasoning and thought, I think a lot of it is based on their situation. You know, if you have somebody who's dying or who's desperate or who is, rich or is in prison, lots of these characters are facing a certain situation, and the difference or voice comes through that.
Right.
I think a final thing to say on that is with flash fiction, it's very versatile how you can present a story. You can present a story as a shopping list or as a question and answer or, such a variety of different ways. That's another way that you can, that I tried to keep readers interested by varying like the form of stories. So as you saw, that one was a series of questions and answers, and it's actually written in the second person, as Amanda is referring to herself. So yeah.
Yeah, as I read that, I could almost hear her, like her training officer, asking her those questions and asking her to, explain what would you do in that situation. She's kind of going back to her days as a trainee, and the voice of her instructor is so brilliantly depicted, because that's exactly what she would do. She's in for a cop, every one of those situations is unique, and they need to rely on their experience and their training. And she seems like, I mean, how old is Amanda again? She is
Good question.
27, right? So she's not an experienced, wily vet who operates on hunches. There are no hunches yet for her. And an incident of violence is probably a new experience in her small town. So how is she going to decide what to do? She's going to go back to her training. And it really, for me, that was one of the I'm glad you chose that, because for me, that was one of the sort of fulcrums of the whole book. Sort of the window through which we see that key event. And very gripping, very gripping moment, perfectly placed right in the middle, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I should say as well, like based on characters' voices and things, stereotypes exist for a reason. The cops who like donuts and go to shootouts and
Yep.
excited by violence. I try not to make characters offensive or stereotypical, and shout out to the people who helped me, my publisher Mark, and a couple of friends, Thomas and Hans, who took a look through the book. They are Americans. I think Thomas is Canadian, but they have a deeper view of what these people might or might not do and say, and that was very helpful in keeping the characters sensitive and realistic. And I think that's important for all writers to do that, to check in with that if you're writing from outside your
Absolutely.
perspective, which we usually are.
Absolutely.
And also notice a couple of questions. So yeah, please, if you've got questions, just drop them in the chat, and I'd love to answer them at the end. We are, we've got enough time to answer them. So
Okay. In that case, Phil, why don't we move to the next reading?
yeah, certainly. Let's have a section from after. Yeah, thanks for the question, Pallavi. Welcome along. We're talking about my book today. So props to coming along to say hi to Paul, and we're talking about a new fiction book, that I've published. Great. I'm going to read the final section for today from Eduardo Lopez, who is a migrant worker in the United States in this unnamed town. And this is after he has experienced his life-changing event of leaving his job, and we'll find out what he's decided to do in this reading. Eduardo Lopez. It's tomorrow, and I haven't left yet. I sit in my car and watch the moonlight hit Lake Pinner. After texting those pendejos at Rubicon, I went back to the residence. Rent's not due for a few days, but I told my daughter I'm coming home, so it's a 1000% done deal, her words. My $100 is too tight for celebrations. There's no celluloid moment where I smack golf balls into the lake and howl into the night. No six-pack of brewskis with a buddy. No buddy, actually. The guy I was friendly with at the residence moved to Boston and changed his number. I exit the car and walk along the shore. This place ain't so bad, but it's nothing without family. I can't imagine turning 50 here. When you pay to get across, they don't tell you you'll be lonely. Not many stars tonight. I spark the last cigarette in a pack and skirt the water's edge by the sound of lapping waves alone, just like back in Michoacan. A 10-hour day on the aguacate groves wrecks your back and the dust sits in your lungs. 180 pesos ain't much, but it pays for gas and a full cooler. A couple of kids in the no-lights pickup see my Marlboro Cherry through the night air. This high schooler leans out and says, Hey, is that weed? You a narc? I reply. Then a laugh bursts out. Just a regular old smoke. He seems disappointed. You know anyone who wants to buy a car? I counter. Corolla, good condition. Just want 1,000 for it. He doesn't know how to reply. Stupid, really. How would they even get in touch? I tossed the cell into the lake 10 minutes back. Never mind, kid, I say. I'll find someone. One last drag on the cigarette, then I crush it in the dirt. The cell is gone. Eduardo Lopez can't be traced. When he goes over the border, it won't be through the checkpoint. It won't be with his hospital security badge and sterilized scrubs. It will be midnight. He will spend every darkened hour crawling through the scrubland in some arid dust hole between Arizona border towns, like returning to the womb. And 3 days later, he'll arrive in Michoacan, sign the Finca work register, take a gun from the autodefensas, lower his eyes and duck his head under the low front door, suffer the accusations of his family, hand over a few crumpled dollar bills, all the ones that remain after 4 years in El Norte. Then he'll lift his 11-year-old daughter up to eye level and say, Sweetie, we're going to the lake.
Thanks for that, Phil. That's another lovely chapter. Very different, right? A very different experience for Eduardo.
Yeah, it was difficult to choose 3 different characters where we can get a little bit of their story, which gives a peek to some of the trauma and excitement that's happened to them. But rest assured, big stuff happens to all of these people, and we get some kind of closure at the end of the book.
Mm-hmm. This chapter, Eduardo's story, involves little sprinkles of Spanish. Obviously, he's originally from Mexico. He speaks Spanish, and again, to characterize him, you've sprinkled in his thoughts in Spanish. Even if he's incredibly fluent in English, he's going to have some thoughts in Spanish. I thought that was a lovely flourish. Was that always? Did that come naturally, or did you think it was like a strategic necessity in characterizing Eduardo?
It's something I recommend when you're writing a character who is from a different land, because, or if a story is just set in a non-English speaking country and it's important to show that language and culture, people have a great ability to understand words or short phrases based on the context of what's around it. So, people might not know all of those words, but they'll be able to guess them if they are, English speakers. And yeah, I think it adds a bit of color and reality to Eduardo. I spent some time in Mexico myself, so encountered a lot of people who have traveled north to work or who have family who work there, and yeah, hopefully did justice to the great people of Mexico.
He his story really adds an element of pathos, a human touch, right? Because he's gone through this. His trauma is part of his trauma is having been in the small town, having been to the U.S. That alone is disruptive. Is a disruptive period in his life, but now he's going home.
It's a
It's
positive end to his story. I
Yeah,
think it's kind of disappointing, but also positive for him ultimately. So it's
yeah.
not. People who know my writing might think that I'm always have sad endings and difficult endings, but it's not all sadness in this book. There's a bit of both.
Well, in the lovely final sentence, right? He lifts his 11-year-old daughter up to eye level and say, "Sweetie, we're going to the lake." Really beautiful, hopeful little moment there that he's holding on to. That's motivating him, right? That's what he's going home for. It's brilliant. I have to ask, although you're not going to read it, there's an amazing typographical flourish on page 115 with Molly's. Look at this, everyone. This, when I say typographical, I mean it's not really related to the story, it's related to the way it looks on the page. This fascinating structure. How
This
did that happen?
I think that's just years of writing on LinkedIn has trained me to focus everyone's eyes down the pyramid to ever shortening lines. I guess that's just an example of what I was talking about: difference in form and keeping people engaged, and creating difference between each character's story. That occasionally we get this different form of writing and of design to the
Yeah.
to the text.
As it comes toward the end of the book, this moment, when I turned the page and saw that, every other chapter looks like a normal, everyday, structured novel. When I turned the page and encountered that, I was hit with the visual force of that, the way that looks and what was happening in it. And it felt like, coming as it did toward the end, it felt like a real shot of energy into not just the story, but the structure of the story. So the way this novel is done is so uniquely structured. That's like a little shot of structure, reminding you that structure is almost a character in this novel. I just thought that was incredible. It just slapped me in the face when I encountered it. Yeah, just an incredible integration of story and structure. I guess that's my point.
Yeah,
Well
thanks for
done.
bringing that up. I think just very versatile, like this type of writing, this type of book. There are so many different modes you can use and ways to connect the story. If you're looking to write in a hybrid or a creative way and include poems or different forms of writing in a book, then the novella in flash, or certainly this kind of short book is a way that you can do it and put that together.
Yeah, brilliant. And again, I want to say it again to some of my language learners there. Don't be afraid to get this book. It's very accessible. It's challenging. I'm not saying it's easy to read. It's a good challenge, but it's accessible. You can read it and understand it. It's very clearly written.
We said, Paul, at some point that I was going to talk about the publishing process. So, in case anyone listening is interested in that, and I'm sure some of the people watching this on replay will be tuning in to find out, how does one get a book published? Might be good to talk about that now, I guess.
Yeah, let's do that. How did you, by the way, it's interesting to me too, how did you approach the publishing process? You have a finished manuscript, you're content with its final edit, and you're ready to publish it. You're alone in your room. What do you do next?
Well, there's some great resources in the UK where one of the experts on this form, Michael Lovejoy, who's based in the UK, talks about the form, recommends some books. There's various Facebook groups and places where writers of this form connect. And I think on some of his resources, he lists publishers which are currently accepting manuscripts or are interested in novellas or novellas-in-flash.
Okay.
And from that, I think I hit upon Bamboo Dart Press, which is a sister press of the publisher which put out this book. This is with Pelicanesis. And so as this story is set in the US, I approached a few US publishers thinking it's going to be more relevant for them than publishers based in the UK, which my first book was with. And yeah, essentially keep your eye on all of these lists for calls for submissions and publishers who are accepting certain types of books. These tend to be like smaller independent publishers. HarperCollins or Simon & Schuster are not open to receiving manuscripts. There's a very strict process about finding an agent and so on. But with literary work like this, you can often find independent publishers. And I got in touch with Mark at Bamboo Dart Press, and he also runs Pelicanesis, which is for longer books, as this is, more than a very, very short pamphlet. And it was brilliant to work with Pelicanesis. I'm so happy that we've worked together because Mark is passionate about short fiction. Pelicanesis puts out the best microfictions anthology, which selects, the absolute award-winning and best of the very, very short fiction, which is published each year on the web. And there's some of my favorite writers like Meg Pocras, who's put out plenty of work with Pelicanesis as well. So that's what attracted me to that particular publisher, and it's been great working through the process. And I think I sent the manuscript to them maybe last May, and here we are in April 24, and the book is out. So it's been a fairly swift process, and really great working with Mark on editing and putting this book together. So thank you very much for showing faith in me, and I really hope that this book makes a little dent in the world of American novellas-in-flash.
Mm-hmm. I think you've touched on something really important there, which is that when you finish writing something, you have to put another hat on and you have to market your book or publish it, and that can take time. But the key is to send your manuscript to these publishers, and just like any sort of auditioning process, you have to understand that what you're trying to do isn't to be validated, but to find that person who is passionate about what you do, believes in you, and they will champion you and they will publish you. But that's not for everyone, right? You have to connect with that person. So you have to find them first. They're out there. It's not a question of whether it's good or bad. Sometimes a publishing company will look at it and go, that's brilliant, but it's not what we publish. I've had that experience. I mentioned earlier about the New Yorker. it doesn't mean you're bad and you should give up, right? You have to have the faith that that champion is out there somewhere. It's up to you to find them and connect with them. Would you say
Yeah,
that's true?
yeah, of course. I mean, with short fiction as well, I've had a lot of stories published or submitted to competitions that have, placed or done well when it was just the perfect moment for that story.
Right.
Sometimes you have to sit on work, and then an opportunity comes up for you to submit, or a themed competition comes up, and your piece will fit it perfectly. And I guess that was the case with Pelicanesis. They were in the right mode and the right mood to put out another book this year, and
Hmm.
thought that my book was a good fit. So keep the faith, keep submitting, and the right stories will find the right home eventually.
Yeah. Phil, should we take some questions?
Yeah, I've noticed a few questions here. Let's go through them. Got an interesting question here from Anik. Anik, thanks for coming along. Question from LinkedIn. Which authors of short stories, novelettes, or flash fiction have inspired you, Phil? Why have you picked this genre? Which writers inspire me? I'm a big fan of Italo Calvino, so Invisible Cities, I think, could be described as a novella in flash. It's got an interesting. Oh, don't tell me, Paul's reaching for a copy here. It's one of my
I
favorite
think
books.
I have a copy. I'm not sure if it's handy.
Well, while
Don't let me
Paul looks
interrupt
for
you.
it,
Yeah.
I'll explain it. It's a short book of mini chapters about imaginary places, and it's linked by this amazing conversation between Marco Polo and Kublai Khan. And that's really one book that inspired me. I think a lot of the other novellas in Flash that have been published fairly recently, since it's been named as a genre, and we have more competitions and more publishers like putting out works. I've definitely enjoyed the work of Meg Buckrass. As I said before, she's an American writer based in Britain, I think. And what else have I read? Karen Jones. I can't remember the name of Karen's novella in Flash, but it's a very strong character about a Scottish girl, and she's a writer based in Scotland. Who else? I just read David X. Lewis's new novella in Flash. Um, Many I could mention, not a huge amount coming to mind at the moment, but
Yeah.
I
As
regularly read
always.
novellas in Flash. Charmaine Wilkerson, maybe she hit the big time with a great book called Black Cake, but she's a previous winner of a novella in Flash competition, and has a great book out with Ad Hoc Fiction, who is another publisher of these great kinds of little books. So recommend checking Ad Hoc Fiction if you want more novellas in Flash and recommendations on them.
It's something that just came to mind. Of course, I don't have access to my copy, but there's a collection of short stories by the renowned Japanese author Yasunari Kawabata, and he called that collection Palm of the Hand Stories. And I think it was written maybe 60 years ago. And it's maybe a sort of predecessor of flash fiction because each chapter is even smaller than your chapters, and they're just little micro stories, but they're not connected. They're just sort of thematically related, but he called them palm of the hand stories that you could just write on your palm or read with one glance at your palm. It's pretty cool.
Really, really interesting. I'd like to check that out.
Yeah, I'll find the link or something, or send you a copy or something. I wish I had it handy.
Yeah, we got another question here from Mariana. Welcome, Mariana. How are you doing? What are your thoughts on self-publishing? Are there advantages of publishing with a publisher? Good question. I think it obviously depends what kind of book or fiction or writing you want to publish. Essentially, if you work with the publisher, then they take on the responsibility of book production costs, or they should to some extent, and they are often helpful with how to market and sell the book. For that, you usually, as an author, receive a lower royalty than you would if you self-published. Of course, if you self-publish, there's a lot more effort involved to market the book. And on things like Amazon, while it's great that it's open and everyone can publish what they want, there is such a sea of books. You need to invest a lot of time and learning in order to sell copies. I personally think with literary fiction like this, it's great to work with a traditional publisher, especially if they are champions of the form, like I was saying with ad hoc fiction or with Pelicanesis Press. But I certainly think that there's advantages to both self-publishing and publishing. I have been on both sides of the fence. I self-published my collections of short fiction, and I've traditionally published 2 novellas now. So there we go. Paul is on it with showing one of my previous collections of short fiction. And yeah, just a plug, I should say, we're having a book launch today, so I'm trying to promote this book, and would love everyone to go out and check out this book, buy the book, buy copies for all of your friends and families. There is a link to that. I'm just going to post it again. I'm not sure if this is posting on LinkedIn, but I will include a link. I think there is a link included on the event description in LinkedIn. I hope there is. If there isn't, I will add one. But you can go to Pelicanesis Press and check this out. If you are interested in any of my books, then yeah, you can visit my author website, philipcharter.com, or just Google me, or check out my work on Amazon. You'll find my books there.
I'll also put a copy of this recording, if you can get it to me, Phil. I'll put a copy on my YouTube channels, and I'll put all those links in the description so they can access the book and everything else you just mentioned.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that, Paul. We'll be putting all the links there. There's just one final question that we haven't got to. I think it's from Pallavi. Always interested in answering questions about short fiction and short stories. I'm a bit of a nerd about that. I have seen in many short stories a writer stops the story in some interesting parts. Do they want us to imagine the next part of the story? And why do they do that? Great question. Absolutely love that question, Pallavi. Thanks for that. My thoughts, well, what do you think, Paul? Why don't you answer this one? I've done a lot of talking.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think our storytelling tradition has evolved, and now we consume most of our stories through film and television. And because, for example, a movie wants to make money from you, they want to give you an exciting experience that you'll tell your friends, hey, this happened, the movie is great, go see it, go pay to see it. But a movie is structured to answer all your questions generally, so that you have a great experience, but at the end you're completely satisfied. You know how everything ends. Everything is clear to you. But I think in literature, the purpose is different. The purpose isn't temporary entertainment. What I love about a great book or a short story is that it provokes thoughts in me. And when I put the book down, I'm still thinking about it and drawing me in by having me participate. So if there are things unspoken, I have to imagine them. And that makes that connection deeper because I'm participating in the storytelling, because I'm filling in those empty spots. Or, as Pallavi points out, maybe I'm providing an ending that's not resolved on paper, but I'm imagining what happens. For me, that's far more exciting because I could talk to Phil about it. I can talk to my wife about it if she'll listen to me. The story is yours rather than you're entertained and then switched off. We've all walked out of movies and never needed to see it again. But then there are some movies you go back and watch 100 times because it's not fully, the story's not completely told. You're part of it. I think that's what does it. It draws you in and forms a deep connection psychologically into our imagination.
Yeah, great answer, Paul. I think that the final reading that I gave about Eduardo is a good example of that, right? Because he's still currently in the US and he's decided to travel back home and imagines forward, and that like invites you as the reader to write the rest of his story. If it were a
Yeah.
movie, the final scene would be him coming home and lifting up his daughter and then going to the lake.
Yeah.
But here we are in short fiction imagining that. And yeah, that's very much it. It might feel more challenging to read short fiction and short stories because you have to do a lot more of the work. But ultimately, it's so much, I don't know if it's more rewarding, but it's very rewarding because you are participating so much more, as Paul said, in the story. Often, a short story is based around these events, this moment of change, and you are the one who is constructing the before and the after. So yeah, I guess that's a good link to my book as well about
Yeah.
how short fiction works. This is just a
Right.
how-to of how to write short stories.
Yeah. But it's, you mentioned the story of Eduardo. We actually end with that moment where he's imagining forward. When I get across the border, I'm going to lift my child and I'm going to tell her we're going to the lake. We don't know that that ever happens, right? He could get stopped at the border. He could get arrested. He could get killed. He could die of starvation in the desert. A lot of things remain possible. So you walk away from that and you have to decide what you think happens. Or you can talk to your friend about it and say, hey, what do you believe happens to Eduardo? Oh, I think he gets to the lake with his daughter. Oh, you're optimistic. I think he gets shot by the American border guards, or he gets picked up by gangsters, or he dies by a rattlesnake bite. So your feeling about the reality that's depicted goes into it. You're applying your own biases and imagination to it. I have an example. We've all read stories like Harry Potter or whatever, and then a movie's been made, and sometimes the movie looks different than we imagined, right? That we read the description of Hogwarts in the book, we create a picture. We create what that looks like based on the words. And that can be very different than the movie decides to depict it. So in that way, you own the story, you participate in it. For me, that's one of the joys of literature, is being left to participate. There's some room there for you to participate and infer meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so calming to me to read a book because you're just immersed in something else, and we a lot of the sort of scrolling and the digital stuff we do now is quite surface level, and it keeps that anxiety of your current real life quite high. And
Yes.
one way to really access that deeper level of anxiety free great imagination is literature. Drop yourself into
Oh,
someone else's world, and
yeah,
it's so much more immersive, I think, than a screen, though there are some great films and movies, obviously.
for sure.
Well, thank you so much to everyone for coming. I think we are at the end of the questions. If you've got any other questions, just drop them in the comments and I'll get back to you. Thank you so much, Paul, the book model, for holding up the book.
Pleasure.
I'll do it one more time. Here we go. Before, during, after by Philip Charter. This is out now. Find it on Amazon or find it here on screen. The link just here, pelicanesis.com. It's got links to all the outlets where you can buy books. You can also visit my website, reach out to me on social media or my website, philipcharter.com. And a final thank you. I think I've said thanks to everyone who was involved in producing the book or helping this book to become a reality. But thanks to you, Paul, for hosting today. And
My
I
pleasure.
hope you continue to enjoy reading these great stories.
Yeah. And thank you, Phil, for giving the world this because this is great and everyone should read it. And I'm not saying that because I'm your friend. I'm saying that because I love literature and reading, and this really made my year. Let's put it that way.
Great. All right. It has been a blast. It's been a pleasure. I am off to enjoy the weekend and prepare for my next book event next week in Las
All
Palmas.
right.
I'll be celebrating today. And thanks so much for coming. I hope everybody likes the book and keep reading, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Cheers. Congratulations.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.